Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for registering for today's webinar, which is all about how technology can help hospitality businesses to plan for the future. We're joined today by Percipient, who work with the Sage software solutions, Avenue9, who help roll out such solutions, and two high-profile hoteliers. It's 10 a.m. It's Wednesday, the 4th of November. The 4 nations of the UK are in different stages of lockdown, but for us in England, today is our last day of relatively normal business as usual before we enter lockdown again at midnight tonight. It's a heartbreaking situation for hotels and the whole wider hospitality industry. My name is Jane Pendlebury. I am the CEO of HOSPA, the Hospitality Professionals Association. I'm delighted today to be joined by Chris Stock from Percipient, Mark Jelly from Avenue9, Peter Gibson from Hastings, and Paul Fitzgerald from iNUA. Both Peter and Paul are in the process of executing their digital transformation strategy. Hastings Hotel have recently implemented Sage Intacct with Percipient, and iNUA Hospitality are just embarking on a project to implement Sage X3. We hope to be taking some questions at the end after our initial discussion, so please use the questions tab in the GoToWebinar app. If there's not enough time to answer all the queries, we will get back to you afterwards. There will also be a recording and a summary of the key points available on the HOSPA website afterwards within the next day or so. Thank you all for joining us. I'm going to start by asking Chris to introduce himself.
Yeah, good morning everyone. My name's Chris Stock and I'm the Managing Director at Percipient, and as Jane said, we're a Sage business partner and we focus very much on implementing accounting solutions for the hospitality industry.
Brilliant, thanks Chris. And Mark?
Morning everyone, I'm Mark Jelly from Avenue9 Solutions. We deliver cost-effective solutions that ensure our clients are more effective, efficient, saving time, energy and resource, especially with our new Avenue9 Analytics business intelligence application. It's been 40 years since I was qualified from Blackpool Catering College, so I've been in the industry ever since, so know a bit about hospitality.
Brilliant, thank you, Mark. Peter?
Morning, everybody. I am Finance Director for Hastings Hotels Group. We are Northern Ireland's largest independent hotel group. We operate a portfolio of 7 4-star and 5-star hotels across the province, with a couple of spas, a couple of restaurants as well. And I've been with the business for exactly a year. Today is my first year anniversary.
Oh,
and what a year it's been as well.
Yeah, I think there's probably easier years. Thanks, Peter. And finally, but last but not least, Paul.
Thank you, Jane. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Fitzgerald. I'm the CEO of iNUA Partnership, Ireland's leading hotel management and hospitality consultancy firm. We currently run and operate and control 9 hotels, including 4 Radissons, and they're all full service 4 and 5-star properties. And we're probably a bit behind Peter in terms of our kind of process plan and project plans. We've literally just started our IT and digital transformation journey, and very lucky to be working with Chris from Percipient and Mark from Avenue9. So thrilled to be on the call today.
Brilliant, thank you all. So Peter, as you're a little further down the road than Paul is, can you explain a little bit about which areas of your business you're undertaking this digital transformation with?
Yeah, it's really, I suppose, all areas of what you might call the back office or administrative functions, I guess. Starting first of all with our core finance platform, but ultimately extending to things like purchasing and procurement, HR, recruitment, training, staff scheduling, and payroll as well. So all the functions and tasks that need to go on in the background to ensure the smooth running of our hotels.
And what was it that drove the need for change?
I as I say, I started with the business about a year ago, and it became obvious very quickly that the systems and processes that were in place were quite outdated. They all worked very well. It was a very well controlled organization, but just very, very manual and administrative tasks. So, you know, we have people in the hotels keying data into spreadsheets, which were then being emailed or posted in some cases to the finance team, who were then rekeying into other spreadsheets and keying again into more spreadsheets. So, you know, very, very manual and inefficient tasks. And critically, none of this was compliant with the Making Tax Digital regulations, which were originally due to come into effect this year, but as you know, have now been pushed back to next year. So I suppose there was that compliance aspect that was a very key driver for the whole thing. But on top of that, even putting Making Tax Digital to one side, it was clear that you know, there's lots of functionality out there that we weren't availing of, lots of opportunities for us to streamline those processes and make them much more efficient.
And is this part of a wider digital strategy, or is this just a first step and you'll see how it goes?
I'd say it's certainly part of a broader strategy, as I say, across all of our back office processes. So it's not just limited to say finance functions. It is quite broad in scope. I wouldn't say it's going much into say our front of house activities at this stage, albeit that you know, with the efficiencies that we're making and with the changes to our processes, I'd certainly expect it to free up a lot of our hotel staff to be able to spend more time on guest-facing activities.
Great. Okay, that's a really great summary of what you're doing. Thank you, Peter. Paul, similar questions to you, I guess. So which areas of your businesses are undertaking this transformation?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Jen. I mean, it's great to hear those insights there from Peter, and I suppose the narrative from our perspective is very, very similar. So in iNUA, we're really are strong disciples of lean thinking and principles of lean. So back end of 2018, early 19, we would have trained 21 members of our senior management team on yellow belt lean. And off the back of that, we're really pushing hard, or have been pushing hard, to drive competitive advantage from lean, and at the same time looking to leverage the scale of having 9 hotels within the group. And again, similar to Peter, that kind of first staging post there is really looking across all the functional lines and seeing where we can apply principles of lean, stripping out waste, more efficient workflows, more efficient process, and that's across procurement, HR, revenue management, reservations, finance, and digital marketing. And there's kind of 2 themes really underpinning that strategy. The first theme is consistency, where the first staging post is to get consistency of systems and infrastructure and process across the hotels. So all hotels would have the same time and attendance system, all hotels would have the same reservations platform, all the hotels would have the same spa management software, and using the same EPOS and PMS systems. And the second staging post then is really what we're calling integrating the back end. So it's all about integration. And I suppose that's the part of the journey we're at now, to see how do we integrate the back end out of the hotels locally and bring that into a quasi shared service or head office infrastructure. And again, we firmly believe that's where the real add value will be, in terms of, I suppose, pulling out waste out of the system, back to the principles of lean, and bringing all that localized functionality where there's a lot of duplication of effort. So if I take credit control, for example, we have a credit controller in each individual property, but it's the same body of work being done by each of those individuals. So again, going back, just repeating what I said, getting consistency of infrastructure and process has been the first staging post that's done, and now we're moving on to integrating the back end and pulling a lot of the functional stuff into a head office environment and really driving efficiencies off the back of that.
Gosh, so this really is part of a very big project for you then.
It is, and to be fair, I'm not just saying it because it's on the call, but Mark in Avenue9 has really been pushing that agenda for us. That, and back to what Peter is saying in terms of scope, that if we're going to go after this, are we better off just maybe broadening the scope and see, can we really unleash some significant value back into the machine? So yeah, we have really broadened the scope off the back of some good chats and conversations that we've had with Mark over the last 6 to 12 months.
That's really good to hear. And like Peter, were you relying on spreadsheets previously, or are you replacing a different system?
We're using Sage X3 currently, and we're migrating to we're using Sage Line 50 currently and looking to migrate to Sage Line 50. But again, I can resonate with everything Peter said. Very reactionary spreadsheets, lots of errors within the spreadsheets, hard to get this kind of press button reporting culture, no business intelligence culture within the business, no use of dashboard reporting, and a lot of clunky macro-based spreadsheets that perform well, but simple stuff, you drop in a line or take a column out of the spreadsheet and the whole thing comes kind of tumbling down. So yeah, I mean, I can resonate with everything Peter said. So yeah, it's and I think a lot of people on the call can certainly resonate with that as well. That typically is the culture of finance functions within hotels. They sit in the back office, or sometimes they're in porta cabins out the back of the building. But I think businesses now, as we kind of migrate into this new normal, are going to have to look at kind of leaning out the machine. And I think striving for lean and striving for efficiency of process in those back office functions are critically important. And I think Peter's hit the nail on the head, as you begin to find those, as you begin to add value from that leaning out process, it invariably frees time and frees capacity and frees bandwidth up across the property to get involved more projects that interact with guests and guest experience and TripAdvisor reviews and really all that good stuff. So no, absolutely.
Yes, I think now is the time when efficiencies from technology are absolutely crucial, especially when we've got possibly a leaner workforce and a more flexible workforce who are possibly taking on multiple roles at the moment as well. So that makes perfect sense. Chris, is that something you're seeing sort of generally? Is that a trend, would you say, in the industry over the last year?
Yeah, definitely. I think what we started to see probably about a year, maybe 18 months ago, was obviously the industry had invested very heavily kind of in slick, kind of intuitive customer-facing front-end systems and websites. And that's probably the right thing to do. But then what they were left with there was creaking back office systems, as some of the guys have alluded to. So, you know, the realization was internal employees, finance teams were using quite expensive legacy software and spreadsheets and a lot of manual processes, which is obviously taking time. That's inefficient. So yeah, sort of probably from mid 2019 onwards, we've started to see a lot more adoption in modern finance systems, particularly cloud as well, because cloud obviously takes away that internal infrastructure requirements. And ultimately what that started to lead to is that much more that agile finance function. So as the guys have talked about, more strategic, you know, timely, the information's pushed to the users through dashboards. And it helps a lot more on the decision-making side of things as well. Obviously, it goes without saying, more modern systems, processes are automated. It's reducing that, you know, manual errors and inputs, that type of thing. So it's really the finance functions then now become a lot more. It's adding value to the business. It's a benefit for the business, and the culture's changed. They're focusing a lot more on data analysis as opposed to data input or you know, bringing together numerous spreadsheets, etc. That some of the guys have talked about, and that's ultimately helped break down silos as well, by giving that easier access to information. So a lot of our customers that we've engaged with, we've taken on that journey really.
Brilliant. And your mention there of manual input, there's a stat which I can't quote completely accurately, but 90-something% of spreadsheets around the world have got an error in them somewhere or something. Yeah. There is a stated something along those lines, isn't there? So Mark, have you been seeing similar trends to Chris then in the last year, would you say?
Absolutely. There's been certainly a move to a more paperless environment. Self-service as well for both guests and staff. You know, the ability to for a guest to look after their own profile online, mobile check-in, mobile key, order at table. All of these have certainly come to prevalence since March, since COVID. Some of us have been banging the drum for a number of years about trying to get things out of the, from the administrators in the hotel out to the customers themselves. We are a retailer after all. Retailers have been doing this for years. Why haven't hospitality? Paperless with data to the desktop is an absolute must at the moment, with reduced headcount in hotels now. The information is still going to be required, but with less people to do it. And it needs to be done on the same timeline. So how are we going to do it? It's got to be automated, and by automating it, you also get one version of the truth. So you've got one number and no spreadsheet error that's going to cause 166,000 COVID cases to be missed.
I think perhaps they need an Avenue9 solution with Percipient in the States to run the election results. They could do with a bit more single version of the truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think for a number of our customers, the idea is not, you can expand the way you do things without increasing headcount, and you can make yourself more efficient without increasing headcount. So if you want to expand your finance department, as in you get more entities involved, by making the technology better, you don't have to put an extra head in. The technology is there for people to use to be able to get the information out in a far more timely manner.
Absolutely. And Chris, since the pandemic, so since I guess March, when we all really opened our eyes to what was going on, have you seen changes specifically as a result of that? Mark was saying that he thinks it's maybe speeded up the implementation of a lot of technologies that people were talking about. He was certainly talking about before. Have you seen a difference with the calls that you've been receiving at the office?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think when the pandemic came around, our customers, at least, it was working out, how best can we support them, how best can we help them, and then the conversation started to shift. I think probably it helped the realization of some of the things we've talked about. Really, automation is always there in a modern system. In some of these old legacy systems, that's not there. It's all very manual. And then when teams are not then sat in an office together and they're working from home or whatever, those legacy systems and those processes are even harder to run then than they perhaps were when everyone was in an office. So yeah, that was a noticeable change. And then the big shift for us really has been remote delivery. I think Microsoft Teams has been a godsend for a lot of people in the last 6 months. We were already using it in a fashion. I wasn't. I'm probably quite old-fashioned. I was still probably wanting to call people and not see my face on a screen so much. But it's commonplace to us all now. I don't see how that will then ever change. And but what, if you said to me at the beginning of the year that we would sell systems, we would implement systems and support people without actually meeting them face to face, I probably wouldn't believe you. But we're actually doing that now, and the technology's enabled us to do that, and it's working. I think delivering on Microsoft Teams, the sessions are almost much more sort of focused, and you're not needing consultants on site for a whole day. You can do 2 or 3 hours, and then you can go back and do 2 or 3 hours another day. You can record a session as well. So from a training perspective, it's a lot better because someone can go back and look at that session if they've not made any notes. So I think that's really enabled, probably accelerated then in a way how we can deliver a system.
Yes, and do you think that might be more of your plan going forward to deliver more over time? Would you ever have considered that previously? Did you always do?
We had already done it. We had already delivered one project that way anyway. It was a customer in Ireland actually, and yeah, they wanted it. They wanted it that way, and that worked. So yeah, that probably worked out quite well that we'd already done that. Yeah, I think so. I think it's certainly a way forward. It's certainly something that we'll be looking to do.
And Mark, is that something at Avenue9 you will be delivering more over using technology rather than face to face?
Absolutely. We've got a number of projects, one of which is in the Ukraine at the moment. So, and that's all remote. So the desire and need to deliver remotely is even more prevalent.
Absolutely.
And we've found no challenge with doing it remotely. My air miles have gone down, and my avios have shrunk.
Not that you could use those anyway at the moment.
Absolutely.
So there we go. I'm just actually having a look at, we've got quite a lot of online questions already, so I'll just have a quick scan through of those so that we don't go completely off topic before they become irrelevant. Peter, there's one here for you asking which back office systems you have integrated with.
So at the moment, then we are concentrating on integrating our sales platforms first of all. So we use V1 as our main PMS system. It's provided by Agilicis. So we've got an integration built into Sage with that. We're also integrating our SPA software, which is provided by Premier. And we're also integrating our till system as well, which is provided by Pixel Point. So all of those are being integrated, and as well then separately to Sage, we're implementing a procurement tool called Procure Wizard, and that also has a built interface into Sage Intacct.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess most of those interfaces were already developed before we had to go through this pandemic and remote learning. Have you had experience much of the remote training or integration or technology installations? Or
it's interesting actually to hear Chris's comments on that. I mean, actually, it was, doing it all remotely was kind of what I would have expected. I guess prior to Hastings, I worked in an organization that was across multiple different locations. So it was just a way of working that I was used to. I guess I was used to doing Teams meetings and working remotely. And as Chris said, I find it a much more efficient way of working. You can be much more productive in the day with short Teams meetings. I'm a big fan of the short meeting, don't like long meetings at all. So with technology the way it is now, you can see people, you can speak to people online, and I just found it worked very well. It helps as well, obviously, with a cloud-based system. It makes it a lot easier for all of that to be done off-site. So no, I thought it was great. Actually, I think I'd actually prefer to do it remotely in this way.
right, and I guess also from being in the cloud, you don't have to worry about rebooting the server yourself so much. It's somebody else's responsibility to make sure the software is up and running.
It's brilliant, yeah. I mean, you can literally access the system from, as long as you've got a web browser, that's all you need. So very flexible.
Okay, very good. Gosh, the questions are, we're going to overrun if we're not careful. So one of the questions here is, how can the technology manage future lockdowns? Now, I don't know who wants to pick up an answer to that one. Maybe one for you, Chris, I should imagine. So how can technology manage future lockdowns? Let's hope we don't have any more, but I think we might.
So how can it manage future lockdowns?
Yeah.
I'm not sure the angle that's perhaps coming from, but I think from our perspective, I suppose it's in terms of delivery, it wouldn't change too much for us. I guess maybe the question's more perhaps on the reporting side in terms of the intelligence that the system could provide out, and obviously some of the software that Mark would deliver as well there. So yeah, I think it would be from a reporting perspective. I would say, the intelligence that the dashboards would push, and that's where again modern systems provide much more intelligent output, if you like. You're not years ago you'd run a report, you'd have to go and get it off the printer, that type of process. Whereas now, Peter's logging in the morning, he's got a dashboard there that he's looking at that gives him a lot of insight, a lot of data, and that can sit not only across the finance system, can sit across his other systems as well if he needs it to. So that information that is very much pushed to him, as opposed to him having to pull it, which perhaps he would previously have to have done.
Yes. That takes me back to doing night audit and pulling reports off the printer, and you had one chance. If the paper got messed up, you'd lost your report pretty much, and then spending probably an hour tearing off those bits of paper at the side that were holding them into the printer. But yeah, that's all gone now. Now there's one here that you may not want to answer, and we can certainly address this question individually. The question is, what levels of investment are each of the hotel companies making? So that might be a little bit too sensitive to answer, but if anybody does want to add anything onto that, or should we just move on from that one? We'll move on from that one. I think that's probably
Jane, can I just go back to that previous one, if you don't mind?
Of course.
So how can technology manage future lockdowns? Well, I think the first thing that happened in England, particularly, or the UK, was, the Chancellor changed the VAT rate, and he put the VAT rate on till a date in time. And for a lot of the legacy systems, that is an absolute nightmare. Changes of tax code and changes of any regulation like that. So the technology vendors need to get cuter at how we can make global changes like that to make the customers not have to ring them for support and charge them for it.
Yes, that was we've heard a lot about that VAT change actually in the office here. And some systems it was hard coded, so they literally had to make massive changes to enable people to change the rates.
So that to me is abhorrent. So we need to get away from that, and there's no doubt that he's going to keep in my opinion, he's going to keep the flexible VAT rate on non-alcoholic drinks and alcoholic beverages. So we need to put the flexibility into the POS systems and into the PMSs and into the finance systems that we can change tax rates at will.
Absolutely.
And the other thing to manage the future lockdown is, people need to have a business continuity plan. We need to have and incident response plans. Now, as part of PCI, you need to have that anyway. But I think this has just highlighted the fact that a lot of companies don't have those. And now's the time to think about it. But that's the documentation, how you access things. The chain of command. If you invoke BCP, all of that needs to be thought about, so that you have a plan of action from invocation through to coming out of it. And I think that's another point that we need to get across.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well raised. And I guess that in a way takes us back to the point about delivering training over Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be. In that, if there is a change of staff or people working from home, then they can go back and replay parts of it so that they can refresh their memory or even learn new things completely if they're suddenly got a different area of responsibility in the business. Thank you for bringing that one up, Mark. Paul, I've got one specifically for you. It says, what other technology are you looking to introduce? And I think this is specifically digital marketing was the specific query. But if you want to answer that and add in any others, that would be interesting.
No, I mean, absolutely. So I suppose from a digital marketing perspective, we've just launched 2 software platforms. One is Avenue9 and the other is Res Diary. So Avenue9 really is kind of mastering the upsell. So when the guest makes their room booking, they get a very targeted and tailored email asking them to book perhaps a spa, to book afternoon tea, or to I suppose to corral them to make a reservation in the restaurant. And then Res Diary is really pushing that envelope where, from our market research, is telling us that people want to be able to book all those extras on an app or on a web interface. The days of calling up to the reception desk when you check in to make that booking are probably gone, because frequently you can disappoint the customer where when they check in for their room and they look to make a dinner reservation or a spa, both are actually booked out for that evening. So you have 2 problems. One, you have an unhappy customer, and secondly, you're giving that incremental business to a competitor. So on the digital space, they're the 2 that we're really working hard on, and that's about looking at our databases of customers, cleansing down those databases, making sure the transition out to email to those customers are actually very, very slick, and then I suppose integrating that back into the various systems, the actual PMS, and then ultimately back to our revenue management software to make sure that the right rates are going out on all those touch points out to consumers. So in the digital space, that's really what we're pushing hard on. It's the Res Diary platform and the Avenue9 platform. They're 2 pieces of software that we've dropped into our business over the last 12 months.
And do you truly believe that by the time you're finished, you will have a single version of the truth, which I think it was Mark mentioned that? Is that something that you truly believe will be achievable?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we are chasing the holy grail of, I suppose, deploying a business intelligence piece of kit at the top of our hierarchy, and that's truly agnostic in the sense that it will talk to all these various systems. Now, you talk to the likes of Chris and his peer set, and everyone says, yeah, that is fundamentally achievable. But as I said earlier, getting consistency of all that software infrastructure the same across the hotels, we believe is the first staging post, and we have that done. So yeah, we have confidence that let's pick the business intelligence product to sit on top of that hierarchy and get all the systems talking to each other, and as you say, have one version of the truth. And back to Chris's point that email reports become a thing of the past. You just literally log on to your tailored and personalized dashboard every morning, and that has the information sitting there. So if you're head of food and beverage, it's got food and beverage
I think we might have
metrics, or
He's back.
it's more. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, carry on, Paul. We can hear you.
Yeah. So no. So I was saying it's back to Chris's point that we reports, and it's one version of the truth delivered in a dashboard report, and those dashboard reports are individually tailored. So if it's a general manager, their dashboard is a holistic view of the hotel property, whereas if you're the head of a department for food and beverage, by way of example, your metrics are all tailored to food and beverage. So yeah, absolutely, we are chasing that holy grail, and we're confident with Chris's support and Mark's support, we'll get that over the line.
Okay, and a similar sort of question on the data. Are you finding an increased need for data analytics to leverage insights from data that is captured but not currently used? I guess, Paul, if you'd like to answer that, and then Peter, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, I suppose if I pick two examples from a rooms perspective, to us, so how much of it is tours, how much is MICE business, how much of our conference business drives our room business. If we hold about 400 weddings across the 9 hotels every year, how much room business comes from weddings? So the ability to get at that data and splice and dice it and present that back in to the relevant stakeholders is critically important. And I suppose that business analytics piece is critical, and we certainly see it as a big cultural sea change from a finance function perspective. So typically finance back in the rear view mirror and tell you how the business has performed historically. Now with the new deployment of technology and taking efficiencies out of process, we're asking your finance team to start sites back into the business. And from a beverage perspective, we're doing a lot of work on engineering, menu selection and margin management, but clearly you need to have very good data as the building blocks for that. So you need to understand what are your top selling meals, when are they sold, what's a top selling meal on a weekend, what meals are favorable for kids, and splicing that down. When do your weekly specials sell well, which weekly specials don't sell well, and again, kind of going in and trying to pull that out of an EPOS system and dumping it into a spreadsheet and getting some poor individual to kind of cleanse that down just isn't the way it has to be. I mean, it's about pulling that data out, kind of press button, and again, presenting those insights back into the business. So absolutely, I mean, I spoke about competitive advantages earlier, and as we all know, data is a commodity in itself. So if you can get control of your data, cleanse it, and bring it into some infrastructure that you will push competitive advantage into your business, absolutely. So that's what we're chasing as well.
Great, thanks, Paul. Very comprehensive answer. I don't know if that's if you've got anything to add to that, Peter. I'll be impressed if you can find something that Paul's missed.
I'm not sure I could add to, but certainly would agree with all of Paul has just said, and I'm sure X3 is the same. But certainly Intact gives us the ability to slice and dice the data in multiple different dimensions, be it as Paul said, food and beverage or housekeeping or whatever, but also right down to individual bars and restaurants as well, and down to the time of day. So we've gone from not just monthly reporting, but to weekly reporting, and in some cases daily reporting as well. When you're operating across certainly multiple locations, it's good to be able to slice the data and then compare across the locations to try and understand why some are doing better than others in certain aspects of their business.
Right. Okay. And Mark, I'm sure you've got something to add on the importance of using technology and data to analyze performance.
Well, absolutely, because that's the, when I worked with Carl Weldon all those years ago, we used to, on Lotus 123, we had to produce an A4 spreadsheet that was faxed over every morning with the 8 key KPIs on it. So it was running the hotel from a A4 sheet of paper, and that's what dashboards do now. All we've done is take it into the digital age instead of the paper and fax age.
And how about digging down, data mining, and that sort of thing? What would you say? What would you have to say about that?
Well, if you can drill through from the dashboard through to the source data or the source information, even more so because you get far more insight. You can answer the question whilst you're on the phone rather than having to take it away and having to do a work on it on another spreadsheet to get the analysis that you need. You can show where the correlation is between, if you're up on last year but down on budget, here's why, and this is the cause of the issue, and publish it out to the correct audience.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got a comment here, but not a question so much as just a comment that it all shows huge reliance on what we now have on our internet suppliers, and Wi-Fi coverage and all of that is sort of more important than possibly ever before, with fewer staff on site as they are at the moment. So I don't know, Chris, if you've got any predictions for life after the pandemic, any predictions for 2021 and beyond, and whether we'll see any changes in the use of technology or whether we'll just have more of the same but just get more efficient.
Yeah, I think we've probably already seen it. I think it will accelerate it. I think the guys, Peter and Paul, have already perhaps touched on that and talking to customers. We were seeing that as well. I think if anything, it'll accelerate it. I think people will look for automation, and then prior to perhaps COVID anyway, the requirement for data, that thirst for data, that thirst for insight, which is really what we're talking about. That's what it provides. I think that's the key. So I think that trend will continue. That trend of, I said at the start about that old-fashioned back office to where Peter's at now, to where Paul will get to, that requirement for that I think will continue. And I think maybe COVID will accelerate that in some cases where people can obviously invest at this time, which is obviously again a key factor.
Yes, whether they can or they can't exist. I've heard two sides to the argument about installing technology, and one is that frees up people for more front of house interaction with guests and whatever. It frees you up because it's all being done for you. But I've also heard the counter argument that managers are now stuck behind screens looking and reporting and making sure everything's inputted into the systems correctly. I don't know what your experience is on that. Whether Peter, whether you find you or your teams or the front office staff have more time for guests now as a result of your implementation.
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the relatively early stages of the implementation, but certainly we've already been able to stop them or ask them to stop doing things that they were doing previously. I understand the point about you don't want your general managers to be sat behind a computer screen all day trying to figure out how to get stuff. I would say that the pages that we've built for them on Sage are relatively straightforward, and there's few of them as well. So they've got a GM dashboard where they can see the sort of headline KPI information, and then they've got a suite of reports as well that they can easily access and pull up when they need to see them. So I haven't seen any evidence yet of that increasing the amount of screen time for them.
And would that be true for you, Paul, as well, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we probably have a slightly different model where, as I spoke of, we're looking to integrate the kind of, how should I say, the back office functionality out of property level. So a lot of that screen time is being delivered from a head office function. So perhaps counterintuitively, we're actually freeing up more bandwidth at property level. And what we're saying to GMs as well, you don't need to worry about whether the journals are going to Sage and the debits and credits are actually balancing. We'll we'll manage we'll manage that for you. What we want is for you, your director of sales and your financial controller based at property level to be real partners in running that business, looking around corners, building strategy and dealing with the day-to-day challenges that arrive. And most of those challenges are driven by people in terms of managing your team, keeping them motivated, but more importantly, it's the guests coming through the actual front door of the hotel. So our chase to integrate the back end outer property level into head office is very much what you speak about, Jane. It's to prevent that notion, well, you need to spend between 9 and 11 on a Wednesday morning cleansing down report X, Y, and Z. And I mean, fundamentally, the kind of move to dashboard reporting should prevent that anyway, because as Peter said, you're effectively presenting key users and key stakeholders with a personalized dashboard. They don't need to cleanse any report. They just they open up the interface and it should pull the information through and present them the key metrics that they need to run the business. So I just think that culture change is critical, and we very much see it as being not so much the risk of being glued to a screen, but in terms of freeing up time to do the real must-win battles at property level, which is minding our team and minding the guest.
I think that's the good thing about the role-based dashboard. I don't think you can ever push too much accurate and correct information to somebody, providing it's relevant to their role and helps the hotel, really. I think obviously if someone's looking at a screen that's relevant to 3 or 4 different job roles and they've got to look and find which actual information is relevant to them, then that's wrong. But if it's role-based and they're logging on, it's their dashboard to their role, then I think you can't push it. As long as that data is accurate, you're pushing the right data to them, then I think that's a value add without a shadow of a doubt.
And Mark, in your experience of doing lots and lots of these rollouts, which I know you have over the years, would you say the average hotelier sees that as a benefit, that they free up more time for the guest, or are they more looking at it that they might reduce their headcount, or is it both? I guess in different, depends on the situation.
Well, it's a bit of both. And as I said earlier, if you're an expanding business, trying to put the technology in so you don't have to increase headcount to improve efficiency that way. So it's a slightly on its head ROI. If you're bringing on 2 new businesses and 2 new startups, then how do you maintain the team but still report in the same timely manner? So it's doing that. But all this data is great, but if it's you've got to make sure it's correct. So you can either deliver it to the dashboard as unaudited, and then people clearly know it's a flash number, and no one's going to get the 6 o'clock call from the MD saying, where the hell's all my revenue gone? Or you can put it through a staging process where it's sanitized before it's delivered. So you've got a choice to do, but it's still going to improve the efficiency of the reporting. But I'm a great believer that you need to start from the foundations. If you don't get good data from the beginning, and if you're a group of hotels, you need to standardize where your data is coming from the PMS, for example, standard transaction codes into standard Sage or any other chart of accounts. So you've got one interface to manage, one interface to map. Then you're going to get far more efficiencies out of it than if you've got 7 or 8 different PMSs, different transaction codes, and you've got 7 or 8 mapping tables between all these systems that you need to support. And that has proved in the past to be a big challenge.
And getting the right data to the right person at the right time. And I guess it's always going
Correct.
to be an ongoing training request, because requirements will change, won't they, over time, or people's roles will change. So they may have a dashboard geared for them in their current job role, but they may need that to be edited and amended. And I assume, Chris, you would normally empower you would make sure the hoteliers had the power to do that themselves. But do you find people coming back to you for training on things like that, saying, oh, our dashboards aren't giving us what we want? And I'm sure the answer is that they can, but maybe they're just needing a change to their configuration.
Yeah, we always try and take the approach of empowering the user, really, that train the trainer. So I think, yeah, that can happen. It's perhaps rare because, like I say, you always look to, and like Peter with his team there, you'd always look to make sure someone had that capability. That person leaves and it's different, but it's all about empowering the user. And the tools that are there now, very flexible anyway, so they're quite simple. I was going to say even I could use them, but is a good analogy. It is true, but I'm sure the guys would perhaps relate to that. You don't need to be technical anymore to produce a report. It's not the days of a developer going away in 5-10 days and come back with a report. You can do that quite quickly. You can slice and dice it yourself now. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I've just had a comment from Harry Murray, who I'm sure a lot of you will know. He's Hospice president, but he's also been a hotelier for many years. And his comment is that technology should be about getting the balance right, and it should help managers to have more time to be visible to guests, and in a support role for staff, which is so key. So freeing those people up to welcome the guests in, because that is what we're all about at the moment, or maybe not this week, but typically we're all about welcoming guests into the hotel. I did have a very amusing email received this week from somebody who was having a hard time, as all hoteliers are at the moment, saying, I always said it would be a much easier job if we didn't have the guests, but suddenly we haven't got the guests or the staff, so it's not quite where we've got to be careful what you wish for in this sort of thing. So again, looking forward, do we see any further changes, or anything else speeding up because of the pandemic? Do you think that maybe in the hotels, things that you thought you might do or might do sometime in the future suddenly have become a more immediate problem, or something that needs to be sorted out quickly? I'm thinking perhaps something along the lines of digital key, that sort of thing, where just from the guest contact point of view, that's been something that a lot of people have talked about for a long time. Is that being pushed up the list of imperative things to do?
Well, we're talking to our customers about that sort of thing all the time. We know there are applications out there that can do that, and it's encouraging them to be to embrace the technology, because it's not just mobile key that you get with that sort of application. It's all the other things as well that you can wrap around it. So you get your guest directories in the room. You can get your the food and beverage menus. You order at table, pay at table. Everything through these apps now is vital if we're going to trade in a post-COVID environment.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of those have been developed quite quickly, haven't they, to enable hoteliers to put them in quickly. Yeah, and
online health questionnaires for spas. Online check-in forms. You don't need to have a physical piece of paper anymore.
No, absolutely. And yeah, someone's just pointed out that the investment for some of these things is way out of reach for hoteliers at the moment, with so little income coming in. So I guess, Peter and Paul, you're in a great position that you are able to continue your rollouts of your digital program.
Yeah, I mean, just on that comment, Jane, I mean, it's a fair comment, but I mean, we're looking at it, I suppose, the opposite way around, in the sense that the hotel industry is quite cyclical, as we all know. It's had a very good run from back in 16, 17, 18, 19, great ADR occupancy and all the good stuff. But our sense of it in iNUA is that, from a stakeholder perspective, pressure is going to come on a lot of hospitality business over the next 12 to 18 months, particularly in terms of managing the middle part of their profit and loss accounts, because ADR and occupancy and food and beverage revenues are probably going to be a little softer as we adjust to the new normal. So the real pressure point on the business is going to be from an OPEX perspective. What is business doing to lean out its OPEX? And unfortunately, unless you invest in the IT along the lines of the conversation we've had here this morning, the ability to, I suppose, to take costs out and to lean out your business, I think, is very much a limiting factor. So okay, you can change the toners in your printers and take out pens out of rooms and take out slippers and dressing gowns, all the kind of bare knuckle fighting that hospitality industry has done during many crises, many before. But I just think in this new normal, I think pronounced pressure is going to come on a lot of hospitality businesses to start managing their OPEX and start leaning out the business. And I think without investment, and it is, I don't see it as a cost, I see it as an investment, and that's what we've done with our bank and our investors. We've explained the business case to them, saying, okay, we need to invest in IT. There is clearly a quantum surrounding that, but the ROI on that, it speaks for itself, and it allows you to drive down and lean out your business from an operational expenditure perspective. And unfortunately, because I just think from a top line perspective, things are certainly going to be a little softer for the next, for who knows, 18, 24 months. So
yes, the predictions are saying at least that, I think.
yeah.
So Chris, I'm sure that's
we talked to Prospect last week, and they were on a similar thing. They were looking at it in terms of, what can they invest now in technology to give them the benefits, because they're having demands placed on them by the business that they just couldn't cope with, they couldn't satisfy. They haven't got the information at the fingertips, or if they did, they got to go away to get it. So they were looking at it in terms of, what do we need to invest to give us that? And it's obviously, it is an investment, but as Paul says, over time that investment will be realised. And it's what is that time frame? Yeah.
Right. Yes, brilliant. I'm sure with most of these things there is definitely a return on investment, as long as there's the cash there to actually pay the bill at the beginning.
Of course. Yeah.
Right, a query here with I think it's probably for the two hoteliers. Your views on varying whether you should host on property or going into the cloud. And Peter, have you got? I think you mentioned most of your bits are in the cloud. Does that really work for you? Would you recommend that to other hoteliers, to put as much as possible in the cloud, or have you kept anything, or have you kept much locally?
I mean, first of all, it wasn't something that we necessarily set out to do at the beginning. We were open-minded about that as to what type of solution we would end up with. And obviously, you do have some concerns, I suppose, at the back of your mind about accessibility and security and so on. That said, certainly with Sage, obviously they've got very, very robust systems and backup procedures and so on. But having gone down this route now, I'd say it's something that we're very pleased with, and I certainly find it very helpful just to be able to access the system from wherever and whenever. You're not tied down to a particular location. Particularly again in a multi-location environment, if I'm traveling around the hotels, then it'd be frustrating to say not be able to access data from any of those hotels. So yeah, very, very accessible, very, very flexible. Also as well, reduces the amount of involvement, time, investment needed from our own IT function and support services. So we've been able to progress with our with this transformation with actually virtually minimal involvement from our IT function, because it's all in the cloud. You've no specific system requirements, you've no issues around server capacity, whatever. So we find it very, very flexible.
Brilliant. And same for you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely echo what Peter just said. I mean, from our perspective, there's probably three strands to it. One is the ability to access information wherever and whatever time you want. You're not relying on an FC or an IT person turning on a server or putting a server kind of pack online. I think secondly, from a GDPR perspective, the ability to be able to reside all your data in one place, certainly from a control and risk management perspective, gives us a huge amount of comfort that we know where our data is and what the security protocols surrounding it are. I think the third point that we touched on earlier, I mean, data is a value driver within your business. And I think, especially from our perspective, and similar to what Peter said, because we're a multi-entity site, the ability to be able to grab all that data and put it somewhere up in the cloud, not locally held, that really gives us the ability to bring insights back into the business, and as I said, try and drive value out of the data within the business. So for those three reasons, I definitely see cloud as the way to go in terms of holding data.
Yeah, and working from home, obviously.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That. Yeah.
I think the trend the trends we're seeing as well. A couple of years ago, probably 1 in 5 prospects are coming to hotels, are coming to saying they'd want the cloud. Now I'd say it's probably 4 out of 5 are adamant we want a cloud solution. And that's the way forward, and probably this has probably accelerated that as well.
I'm sure it has accelerated it. Mark, are you seeing the same? People wanting cloud over premise-based bits?
Absolutely, but it depends on how they want to invest. If they've got the capex, if they've got the cash and they want the capex, then a lot of customers want to still have the tin. Yes, they've got the refresh that they need to do rather than the OPEX cost of cloud. So it depends how they want to fund it. But I go back to the, 14 years ago, Malmaison Oxford had a fire. We were the first to one of the first hotel companies to host with Opera in Frankfurt. We closed the hotel, and by 11 o'clock in the morning, we'd contacted every single guest who was going to stay for the next 3 months, because we were able to access the data on mobiles, on laptops from Frankfurt, and because the server room was dead. We had no server, so if we'd put everything in that server room, we'd have been absolutely ruined.
Yeah.
So, it has its benefits, but you do need the infrastructure in place to make sure that you can run efficiently online.
And someone's just asked, was that fire actually in the comms room?
No, it wasn't in the comms room. It was in the electrical cupboard. So someone knows the stuff. Someone knows then.
Obviously, you can pick that up with them afterwards, Mark. I think that's brilliant. That's bringing us very much towards the end of our allotted time today. So I'd just like to thank everyone very much for listening and for sending their questions in today. That always, I think, makes it more interesting when we know the audience are engaged and asking relevant questions. Please do remember that the opinions expressed today are exactly that, opinions, and should be treated as such. If you need any formal advice, then please get hold of Chris or Mark, or if you want to speak to Peter and Paul, I'm sure they'll happily take your calls as well. Or do come to us and we can put a referral on to you to any professional advisors, or connect you directly with these guys if you're not already connected with them. Thank you very much to my very knowledgeable panel. I think that was a really interesting and informative discussion this morning. So thank you for all your wise words, Chris, Mark, Peter and Paul. And I do just want to take this opportunity to remind everybody here that we are running HOSPACE this year. It's our annual conference and exhibition. It will be broadcast live from the Royal Lancaster, London on the 19th of November. Both Percipient with Sage Intact and Avenue9 will be there as our hospitality heroes, as we're calling them. Other people might call them sponsors. We're calling them hospitality heroes because without them, we wouldn't be able to put on our conference this year. So we're very grateful to them. So please do register. When you do that, you have the opportunity to make appointments with Chris and Mark today, and other of our heroes as well. So please do register, and you can make those meetings in advance, or you can make them on the day. And you can find further information at hospace.org. You can find recordings of all our recent webinars with a summary of the key points on hospa.org. And as I said at the beginning, today's webinar should be uploaded within 24 hours or so with that summary as well. So a big thank you to all of you for listening and to the panelists today. And we look forward to seeing you again online at HOSPACE and hopefully in person. It'll be 2021 now, I'm quite sure, but we look forward to seeing you all soon. So thank you very much, everybody, and it's goodbye from us.